morning, good afternoon, good evening, or it's 2 a.m. Go to bed already. This is Eagle Eyes on Tech. I am Eagle Falcon. Unfortunately, I am here alone today, which is a little disappointing. Just a little. I was really hoping my partner in crime, Regret, would be here today because we've actually got quite a bit of I told you so in for this week. But first I want to talk about a special little update that has been secretly applied to Windows 10 Home Edition. Now, one of the things that people hated the most about Windows 10, and oh lord, do I know, you would never hear the end of it. Never, ever, in a million years, would you ever hear the end of the forced update. I've always been I've had mixed opinions about it, because I see both sides of the argument here. On one hand, you do need to update, and there's a lot of people, a lot of users out there that just, for whatever reason, refuse to update for as long as they possibly can. They go out of their way to make sure that they don't update. I can't even tell you during the XP days how many people would refuse to update Internet Explorer. I mean, let alone in those days, using Internet Explorer was just begging, asking to be hacked, to be infected with malware, with viruses, with whatever, to just catch every disease. Your computer would somehow catch the bubonic plague if you used Internet Explorer. And that was if you used the most recent version of Internet Explorer. Most of them refused to even update off IE6. Which, that was pretty much the equivalent of just going out in the freezing cold weather with no clothes on. You're gonna get sick. You're gonna be infected. It's inevitable. So I understand why Windows 10 had the forced update. But I also understand that a lot of people, myself included, love the freedom of saying when our update is going to happen. And on paper, Windows 10 did it right. It said, we have an update for you. Would you like to restart now and install it, or would you like to pick a time to do it? And if you were like me, you picked a time. And you picked 4 a.m. or 2 a.m. or 1 a.m. or some time that you know there is no chance that you're going to be using this computer. But it had this terrible, terrible habit of just going, yeah, I couldn't do it. And then it delays itself, and you pick another time, and you just keep repeating this process. Until one day, when you don't realize it, and it starts giving you the dreaded 15-second countdown, or in some cases a 90-second countdown, to when the computer's going to restart and update for you. This is where the hate, the utter hate for Windows 10 stemmed from. There might have been little this and that's. that everyone disliked about Windows 10. They didn't like that there were still colorful tiles on the start menu. They couldn't figure out how to get to the control panel, or there's some little this or that was moved around. There are those things. But it was the fact that it came to a point with Windows 10 that if you kept delaying it, if you kept putting off your updates, it will force restart on you and not give you a choice in the matter. And if you have a full screen application, you don't even know it's happening until it's too late. I'm not even exaggerating when I say there is a collage of Twitch streamers out there who had their streams interrupted because the rig they were gaming on forced restarted. But they were still using a different rig to actually stream with. It's a similar setup to what I use on the Jackbox streams on my Twitch account. In fact, that even happened to me once. I was doing Jackbox on a stream, and then all of a sudden the laptop had to restart. So, that's where the hate started with Windows 10. Now, fortunately, after 10,000 years, or at least what feels like 10,000 years, those using Windows 10 Home Edition can now, once again, as it probably should have been in the first place, delay the updates just as you could on Windows 10 Professional. On one hand, huzzah, huzzah, it's about time. But on the other hand, it's about time! What took them so long? It always just seemed like the oddest little change in it. And then on top of that, I have to withdraw my statement earlier that's saying that the forced updates was the biggest reason that people hated Windows 10. No, because the chat actually did remind me what is the biggest thing that annoyed people about Windows 10. The forceful, in-your-face attitude that the Windows 10 update had on people running Windows 8 and Windows 7. To quote Unjust Banana in the Twitch chat, you will love Windows 10. It's not an option. And that fits. It fits so much better than you could possibly imagine. In any case, the most recent update to Windows 10 Home returns a little bit more freedom back to the user. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. Finally. Let's shift gears a little bit here. Now, I want you to flash back for a minute to last week. Last week, I said that every single tech blogger out there and every single tech caster on YouTube that went ahead and just trusted AMD's benchmarks was a complete idiot. Well, guess what I get to do today? The benchmarks are in. And in some regards, Ryzen performed extremely well. On most of them, on the other hand, I told you so. 'Cause 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 I told you so. 'C I told you so. I frickin' called it. Ryzen almost across the board performs slightly less than every single competing Intel chip, including the Broadwell E parts that are going to be replaced soon. I knew it. You want to know how I knew it? Because AMD does this every single time. Every time AMD releases a new graphic card, every time AMD is about to release a new processor, unless it is just comically bad, every single time that AMD gets close, just a little close, to their competitor, they release benchmarks that show that their stuff's a lot better than they say it is. Every time! And what's amazing to me is that every time, everyone falls for it. There's exception to the rules. Tom's Hardware PC Perspective. They appear to be the only ones who aren't stupid. Tech Linus and the others, on the other hand, they just, for whatever reason, just hold up the benchmarks and go, oh, well, this piece of paper that they sent me says they're better, so they must be better. How many times do you have to prove it wrong? Oh, it blows me away that they just fall for it every single time. Now, with that bashing aside, that rant of I told you so aside, you now know that, okay, Ryzen didn't perform as well as they said it was going to. Does this mean it's a failure? No. Ryzen is not a failure. It's actually this is actually very good. The Ryzen benchmarks are actually, they're close to what they sent. They're not as good, but they are close. It is finally a push into the CPU market. And now we're going to need to see where the prices all fall into place once supply and demand are equalized out. Because I'm still not sure at this point if there's going to be a supply issue and the prices are going to go up. If people are going to get wise of this and there's going to be a lot of production and not a lot of demand, which is going to cause the price to go down a little bit. We need to watch that settle out and see where the prices actually fall in. And that's going to be the key of which one sets where. Because their benchmarks did try to have their top end, the Ryzen 7 1800X, compete against the Core i7 Black. The part we were actually just using in the pre-show for a little bit of for a little bit of Alienware competition. But at the same time, the 1800X doesn't compete to the Black. But it's also a lot cheaper. A lot cheaper. Like a third of the cost. So, give it another week. Probably 2. See where everything evens out. See how much the chipsets cost. How much the motherboards cost. you might end up finding out that a Ryzen chip is going to make a lot of sense for your next gaming rig. Might even make sense for a mid-range workstation. The important thing to note here is that AMD is finally back. They're finally competitive again. Huzzah! Huzzah! And I can't wait to see if they try to bring out a 10-core part to compete with the Core i7 Black. If the Opterons are going to make a comeback. If there's going to be Zen-based APUs. Because for the last several months, all AMD had was low-end graphic cards. That's literally it. It's literally all they had. So, welcome back, AMD. You finally did good enough. You finally did good enough to be back on the map. You're back in the race, man. Now, speaking of the GPUs, I want to move on to this wonderful little rumor. And yes, Unjust Banana, I know that AMD makes parts for the Xbox One and the PS4. They, in fact, make the only chip in the Xbox One and the PS4. But as far as PC parts and everything else, that's it. They didn't have anything. Their low-powered APU wasn't... I mean, it's good enough for console gaming to optimize for just that, but that's about it. AMD used to be good at even just performance per dollar. They weren't even good at that for about a year and a half. Intel beat them in their own domain. But let's get back on point. AMD plans on launching the RX 500 series GPUs sometime next month. Now, this confirms a few things. The launch of the 500 series confirms that literally the best that AMD could do with the 400 series was the 480. And that is incredibly sad. It was literally the best. That was literally the best the 400 generation could have. Now, PC Perspective speculates that a lot of the 500 series is going to be rebranded and revamped 400 series GPUs. And honestly, considering the fact the 400 series GPUs were just an embarrassment power-wise, I hope that's not the case. Because then it's going to be AMD relaunching back into the CPU market. Finally, no longer putting tablet parts into game consoles to make money. And then just putting out GPUs that are just the laughing stock of the PC world. That would be just awful. That would literally just be the worst. To just go straight from the glory of Ryzen to not even trying. But enough about Team Red. Let's go over to Team Green for a minute. Team Green, on the other hand, is making two huge changes. First off, which actually isn't even this article, NVIDIA's current top-tier graphic card, which is the 1080, is getting a price drop down to $499. This is important for a couple reasons. One, they realized they couldn't get away with doing $650 for what everyone knew wasn't going to be their top tier card. The 1080 was top dog for the longest time, but everyone knows there's a 1080 Ti or a 1090 somewhere. Everyone knew it. And the fact that the price is being dropped, first off, confirms that, yes, there is going to be a bigger graphic card, which we're going to get to, but B, the fact that the world was willing to say, we're not going to pay $650 for a high-end graphic card. That's kind of the main reason why the Titan's not around anymore. Because those who could afford the Titan would rather just get one that get a Quadro for those purposes. Because that's basically what the Titan was. It was a Quadro card for gaming. Except for the recent Titan X. That was just the 1080. So, huzzah, huzzah. The 1080 goes down to $499. Thank God. Now, let's talk about the 1080 Ti. This is an interesting little card here. So, the 1080 Ti, first off, it's going to sell for $700, which is pretty high. But it is going to be a top-tier card. It is going to be the best card that AMD, that NVIDIA is going to make for the 10 series. After this, it's going to be Voltra, which is going to be GTX 11, so on and so forth. The GTX 1080 was built on the GP104 GPU. If you remember from what I said last week about how, or was it the week before? I don't remember. If you remember how the numbering works, here's how it works. The first two letters determines the make of the card. Last generation was GM for graphics Maxwell. This generation's is GP for graphics Pascal. The first digit represents the revision. In this case, it's a 1. This is the first revision of Pascal. Then the second and third digits determines what's the right term? The power of the GPU. The thing to keep in mind, though, is that the lower the number, the more powerful the GPU. The 1080 was built on the GP104. The Tesla card I talked about 2 weeks ago, I believe it was, or 3 weeks ago, I can't remember. The Tesla card was the GP100. The 1080 Ti is the GP102. So here's some numbers to give you an idea of what we're talking about. The 1080 was 2,560 GPU cores. The 1080 Ti is 3,584. Talking just slightly over 1,000 more cores. Each core, however, is going to slightly lower clock speed. It was 1.6 gigahertz on the 1080. It is 1.48 gigahertz on the 1080 Ti. Boost clock, 1.733 gigahertz on the 1080, 1.6 gigahertz on the 1080 Ti. Texture units higher, about 60 higher on the Ti, 160 to 124. ROP units 64 to 88. Built-in memory, 8 gigs on the 1080, an awkward 11 gigabytes on the 1080 Ti. Both of them are still disgusting overkill. 256-bit G5X memory interface on the 1080, 352-bit on the 1080 Ti. 12 billion transistors on the Ti, 7.2 billion on the 1080, etc., etc. 8.2 teraflops on the 1080, 10.6 teraflops on the 1080 Ti, and the TDP, which determines how much power it sucks, as well as how much heat it puts out. 1080 is 180 watts. 1080 Ti is 220. So this is going to mean, and I think there actually is, there's a picture of it. Yeah, there's a picture of the pins on it. It is going to be a 6-pin and an 8-pin for the 1080 Ti. So if you're like me and you're using an older pre-constructed rig that only has 6 pins, you're out of luck. Then again, also, if you're willing to drop $700 on a new card, might not be the worst idea to contemplate, should I upgrade anything else in the rig too. Now, this graphic card is going to come out next week, and we're going to know more about what this card can do by that time. Who knows? Might only be a minor improvement, despite on paper being close to 20% to 30% faster than the 1080. Only time will tell. Only time will tell. Now, let's move on to probably the happiest news I got all week. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. The Google Chromebooks, at least the in-house Pixel Chromebooks, are dead. Finally. Honestly, the whole Chromebook concept has been very much a niche market, to say the least. No doubt about it. It really only is extremely useful in school environments, or very controlled environments where the user really only needs to do a few little things and has constant connection to the internet. Because when push comes to shove, even your smartphone does more than a Pixel, than a Chromebook, I should say. The Pixel Chromebooks in particular, though, they tried to take one of the worst operating systems that ever blighted modern computing. I didn't say the worst, one of the worst. If I did say the worst, I apologize. I meant one of the worst. Because someone's going to tell me the one that's worse somewhere. It took one of the worst operating systems and tried to put it into the most expensive laptop body it could. Some of these Pixel laptops costing upwards of $1,000 to do less than a phone. You literally would have been better off spending your money on an iPod Touch from several years ago. I mean that seriously. But, thank God, it has been confirmed the Pixel is dead. Now, I'm sure Acer is still going to go ahead and make some cruddy little 9-inch laptops to sell to schools for $50 each, so that the students can go do research and then alt-tab over to, I don't know, play Angry Birds or whatever. I don't even know if I was in like middle school or high school now, what website would I go to just kill time? I mean, I guess Reddit, but I can't imagine that Reddit wouldn't be blocked at like the school firewall level. Oh well. They're gone. Rest in peace, you won't be missed. Alright, so let's talk about Mobile World Congress. So Mobile World Congress happened last week. I believe it started last week Sunday. About 6 days ago. And even before it started, there was heavy rumors coming out about the LG 6, the new LG flagship phone. And I mean, it's about what you'd expect. It's a large screen device, 5.7 inch device, 5 megapixel front camera, 1440 by 2880. And so slightly above 1080p, 4 gigs of RAM, running Android 7.0, 32 gigs of internal storage, 13 megapixel rear camera, and 3300 milliamp battery. Now, that sounds all nice and all, but there's a few things that annoy me about it. One, the removable battery is gone. LG last year showed a mechanism to pop the bottom off to remove the battery and replace the battery. That's gone. Any sort of modularity it had before, also gone. We are back to a standard sort of not really gimmicky phone. But it is supporting a dual camera setup. A 13 megapixels sensor on one, and then wait a minute, no, that's the same sensor. The article just says the LG G6 camera will be a dual rear camera setup featuring 13 megapixel sensor, the company confirmed, with a 125-degree wide-angle view. But it's not saying what the second camera is used for. Is that going to be used for a 2x optical zoom like the Apple phone, or... They're not saying. That's not helpful. Looking through here's nothing. Yeah, they're just saying there's two cameras. They're not even saying what the difference is between the two. So, let's just... Here's a quick tip for you. For LG and every other phone maker out there. If you're going to go ahead and copy Apple, for the love of God, also copy their marketing techniques and actually give the blasted details. So yeah, we got nothing done there. Well, seeing as how LG is not going to give me any details, we're going to move on. That was sad and depressing. So, Samsung did not announce the Galaxy S8 yet. This wasn't surprising. There was rumors floating around all over the place saying that they weren't going to do it. There hasn't been any update as to whether they're actually going to resurrect the Note 7 or not from the dead. But they did announce a new tablet. Two of them, in fact. They have the Galaxy Tab S3, which is going to be a 2-in-1 tablet. Actually, let me make sure I got this right. Yeah, the Galaxy Tab S3, which will run on Android 7.0 Nougat, while the Galaxy Book, another 2-in-1 tablet, is going to run Windows 10. So this means after 3 years of Samsung getting out of Windows, they're getting back into it. Now, I've worked on a couple Samsung tablets that ran Windows 8. And Samsung did some very, very strange things to the operating system on those, to the point where they were almost unrepairable from a software level for the purposes of reformatting it. It was absolutely disgusting what they did. I'm hoping, underline hoping, their re-entry into making Windows devices means they also aren't re-entering their sort of software-based meddling that they tried to pull. Regret the Van just texted me saying he completely forgot EEOT was today. Whoops. So, in any case, we now know that he just realized that we're recording like right now. Any case, regardless, moving on. First off, the Tab S3, the new tablet's going to be a 9.7 inch 2048 by 1536 AMOLED display. And that's going to be at a Qualcomm Snapdragon 820 system on a chip. Dual core processor. I'm not sure if that's wise, going with the dual core SiC. But that's their choice. The S3 is going to support a 13 megapixel rear camera with flash and 4K video recording and a 5 megapixel front-facing camera. Comes with 32 gigabytes of built-in storage and expandable via a micro SD card up to 256 gigabytes. The tablet will be available in Wi-Fi only modes and LTE models, while other connectivity options include Wi-Fi 802.11ac, Bluetooth 4.2, GPS, USB 3.1 Type-C port, sensors include an accelerometer, fingerprint sensor, gyroscope, gyrometric sensor, and RGB sensor. So, without knowing the price, and maybe the rest of this article actually covers the price, it does not. The price is going to make the difference here. The same thing's also going to come with the Galaxy Book. This is a 10.6-inch tablet. Comes with only a 5 megapixel fixed focus webcam. While the 12-inch model... Oh, there is a 12-inch model. Comes with a 13 megapixel autofocus rear camera and a 5 megapixel webcam. So, the smaller one does not come with a rear-facing camera. The 12-inch does. Odd, but okay. Both will use USB 3.1 Type-C ports, though the 12-inch model will have 2 instead of 1. That's nice. They'll have a Wi-Fi variant and an LTE variant. Smaller one will have a 30.4 watt-hour battery, while the bigger one will have a 39.04 watt-hour battery. I'm trying to glance through this, and I'm trying to find the processor in the Galaxy Book. The only thing I can find is that the Book is going to run a 2.6 gigahertz dual core on the 10-inch model and a 3.1 gigahertz dual core on the 12-inch model. And unfortunately, that doesn't tell me much. Without knowing the exact processor that is inside these book, the Samsung Book, it's extremely difficult to tell how well it's going to run. Now, there is one important detail to point out about these Samsung Windows 10 tablets, and that's the RAM. They have 4 gigs of RAM. This is both amazing news and bad news. It is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful breath of fresh air to finally see a frickin' Windows 10 base tablet have enough RAM to run Windows 10. There have been plenty of Microsoft Surface competitors that, okay, you have a Bluetooth keyboard or a Snap-on keyboard, that just travels with it, and then they screw it up by having the tablet only have 2 gigs of RAM. Windows 10 on its own uses 2.5 gigs of RAM. And that's before you start up any background application. That's just the operating system. Immediately on those 2 gig tablets, you go into swap. Immediately. So the fact that these have 4 gigs of RAM, finally, they can actually run Windows 10 properly. Now, the processor is still an unknown factor, and that has me a little worried. But the thing to keep in mind, this means you only have about 1 gig of RAM. If you exceed that, the machine goes in swap and slows down drastically. So this could be you could run WoW on it. But the moment you have WoW running, you can't have Discord running in the background. Or anything else. It has to be dedicated to that one thing. And to answer Aoshaw's question from the Twitch chat, no. It cannot run Overwatch. That's a bad idea. Now we're running short on time. So this is going to be something I'm going to be keeping an eye on. I'm going to be doing some more research as more information leaks out. But I want to get to at least 2 more phones. One is the BlackBerry Key 1. So, first off, did you think BlackBerry was still alive? I didn't. I thought someone bought them. I seriously thought BlackBerry was dead. That someone bought them up or they declared bankruptcy or something. But they're still around. Who knew? The BlackBerry Key 1, it is... Let's find some specs. Unfortunately, they have this thing scattered all over the place. It is a candy bar style phone. Alright. The black and silver candy bar style Key 1, previously known as the Mercury, measures 5.78 inches by 2.85 inches by 0.037 inches and weighs 0.39 pounds. That is really light. It's hard to kind of imagine how light that is compared to a more modern phone like the one I have in my hand right now. The left, right, and bottom edges are rounded and the top edge is flat. There are 2 bottom-firing stereo speakers surrounded by a USB Type-C port. The headphone jack is on top, and volume, power, and convenience key buttons are on the right side. The front device has your usual sort of 3-road BlackBerry keyboard. It is a 4.5-inch screen, 1620 by 1080 screen. Protected by Gorilla Glass 4, front-facing camera with LED flash, and a large I just mentioned that. The keyboard, in addition to having physical buttons, supports touch gestures such as swipe. And that's actually really interesting. And the spacebar has a fingerprint reader in it that early hands-on reports indicate works rather well for quickly unlocking the phone. Further, every physical key can be programmed as a hotkey to open any application when held for a longer press. The camera on the front is using the same sensor found in the Google Pixel, which is a Sony IMX378. In case you were very curious as to exactly which sensor the camera was using. 12 megapixel rear camera, dual LED flashes. And an 8 megapixel camera on the front. Both cameras will record 1080p at 30 frames per second, as well as supporting HDR. Internally, BlackBerry has opted to go with a squarely mid-range hardware. It is running 8 ARM Cortex A53 cores clocked at 2 gigahertz each. An Adreno 506 GPU, 32 gigabytes of internal storage, dual band wireless AC, FM, Bluetooth 4.0, GPS, NFC, GSM, blah. Phone is going to be using a 3500 milliamp battery and is not user removable. It does support Quick Charge 3.0. And the storage can be expanded via a micro SD card slot. So, what does this all mean? This means roughly you have about the same hardware you'd get from the Note 4. So, I mean, it's a phone that's running hardware from 2 years ago, but it is running it on a much more modern operating system. And fortunately, unlike the Notes, the Samsung phones, it is running with less bloat, which is good. The only downside is $550. Which is a little pricey for a phone that's basically running old hardware. But honestly, it's not all that bad, and it's kind of nice to see BlackBerry still in the game. That's a solid effort. That's a decent phone. I wouldn't mind picking one up used. Probably not going to replace my next phone. But we'll see how the rest of the world likes it. Now, I'm only going to be able to get to one more story. We only got about 4 minutes. I have to talk about what I could have swore was a joke. But apparently this was a real thing that launched at Mobile World Congress this year. The Nokia 3310. Now, if you didn't know, which I actually didn't, I had to go relook this up, the 3310 is one of the classic Nokia phones. It originally launched with just kind of your basic sort of cell phone features packs. It had decent battery life, small screen, dial thing, and had like built-in Snake on it. That's pretty much it. And maybe Tetris. Very, very minor, bare basic phones. Incredibly bare bones basic by today's standard. But that was then and this is now. So what does it have now? Shockingly enough, the same thing. It is a very bare basics phone. And oddly enough, as though it was by some sort of joke, one of its key features is the fact it has Snake in the phone. Now, it is incredibly easy for me to mock this phone. It is super easy for me to say, in a modern world where the phones in our pockets perform as well as supercomputers from 15 years ago, it is easy for me to go and mock this phone for even daring to exist. But that would be very short-sighted of me. That would be very close-minded of me. This phone, despite being as early 2000s as it possibly can, does have purpose in this world. I cannot even count the number of people who are terrified of having one of these phones. My father is in that boat. I got him an iPod Touch for his birthday not all that long ago. He hasn't used it at all this year. I'm not even sure how much he used it last year. But there he is with his standard candy bar phone with a slide-out keyboard, texting away and having a phone do phone things. And that's about the only thing this phone is really missing. The Nokia 3310 is missing any sort of slide-out keyboard. Now, there might be one that's on screen. I didn't have a chance to really go through a whole lot of the details to see how it actually works. And we don't have a whole lot of time right now to go into it, but it is a bare basic phone on the bare cheap. And it definitely, without a doubt, has a place to be in this world. No ifs, ands, ors, or buts about it. That's going to do it for me, guys, today. Thank you so much for listening to me today. Please do give a follow up to this podcast wherever you're listening to, whether it be on YouTube, on Spreaker, or wherever it may be. I will be back next week. Hopefully Regret the Band will be with me as well, and then we can move on and talk about what else is going to be here in the tech world. Take care, everyone.